You need to get somebody pregnant. So that's what we're going to do. Well, now the first thing that's going to happen is we need to talk about what a brain looks like. It contains about 100 billion neurons and an equal number of glial cells. That's 200 billion cells, either neurons or glial cells. It has over 100 trillion connections. So all of these neurons, they connect to a lot of different other neurons and other structures. Very, very important.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, genetics plays an important role in creating brilliant creatures, we are, and we are all brilliant creatures. I congratulate you for your brilliance. The environment guides the process of development. So it's how you grow up, it's where you grow up, it's how your parents treat you. All of this has to do with the way that your brain develops. People that have a proclivity for depression, potentially it had something to do with their environment. I have 5 brothers and sisters. Each of us grew up differently. We all grew up in the same environment, but we were all none of us were in the same high school class. We developed in different classes, and because of that, and because there were bullies in one class, and my brother was dominant in another class, because of all of this, that's the way our brains develop differently. I had a brilliant sister, who was picked on because she was so smart. And the reason, I don't know what the reason was. She used to read all the time, and she never watched television. So she got a lot of information out of books. And because of that, because she wasn't watching television at all, she developed, she was brilliant. She was actually quite brilliant, but at the same time she was bullied. So she had a proclivity for depression. She became suicidal at one point in her life. She married a man that she was always looking for somebody who was nice, would be nice to her, and her definition of nice was not be a bully toward her. She married one guy that developed that in time. He became a bully, and she divorced him. And then the next guy she married was a lot nicer and a lot sweeter, who turned out to be actually a woman on the inside. Yeah. And that almost destroyed her. Well, anyway, she died young. She died relatively young, but a lot of it had to do with her fear. But the reality was that she was a feminist, and she didn't fear people when she faced them. She feared psychological trauma. That's what she feared. So she had a difficult time dealing with people playing mind games with her. And so we had lots and lots of extended conversations, me trying to make her a little bit tougher, and her wishing that she wasn't so sensitive to these kinds of things. So we worked on that, and unfortunately, I told her not to marry that guy. I didn't like him. I thought he was gay, and as it turned out, he was transgender, which is okay, but I don't think that's what she was looking for. I mean, she was looking for somebody she's looking for a male figure. And of course, she bragged about him all the time because he's so sensitive to this and sensitive to that. He could tell her what to wear, that kind of stuff. I know, it was really kind of strange. And I didn't like him. I never did like him. But, of course, eventually he told her that he was Vivian on the inside, and things went downhill from there. She developed cardiomyopathy, which is an enlarged heart. Then they went in, and they discovered that her cardiomyopathy was caused because she was developing cancer in her abdomen, and so they did surgery to take out the tumor in her uterus, and discovered it had already metastasized. we fought it for about 5 years, and eventually she died. But of course, you know, it all had to do with the environment. Now, none of the rest of us are like that, but her environment was totally different than ours was. She lived a lot in her mind, and she was bullied when she was in high school. So it was really kind of a sad situation. Anyway, but the rest of us grew up pretty tough. Nobody else was bullied in the class. She was small and relatively flat-chested. And I only mention that because my other sister is relatively well endowed. And because of that, she wasn't picked on like my other sister was, even though she was about the same size. But she was a little bit chestier. And because of that, I mean, and odd things like that, I mean, these physical attributes make that much of a difference in somebody's life. One of my sisters is flat-chested. She was picked on. The other sister was not, and she wasn't picked on, and it may have had to do with her physical attributes. For an egg to be fertilized and to come to term, everything has to be perfect. The sperm must have a full complement of 23 chromosomes and will not be able to swim through or it won't be able to swim through the cervix. It has to be able to swim through the cervix, up through the uterus, and into the fallopian tube to penetrate the ova, unless it is perfect. One of the things that, and of course, unfortunately, I'm one of the individuals. There aren't very many of us around, people who have done sperm counts, especially sperm counts by hand. But unfortunately, I am one of those individuals. One of the things we looked for was motility. Motility had to do with how many sperm do you have that are swimming, not only swimming, but swimming straight. They have to swim straight. We used to see sperm that had a crooked tail so that they'd swim around in circles. And of course, that's not going to work. They're not going to go anywhere. They're just going to stay in one place and not go anywhere. So what you were looking for swimmers. You were looking for long distance swimmers is what you're looking for. One of the things that we did note, this was in, I was doing this in the early 70s, marijuana was relatively popular. It's mostly popular with high school kids, high school punks, smoking a lot of pot. One of the things we did notice was that if, and we could actually tell if somebody was a pot smoker just by looking at their sperm, as strange as that may seem, because they had so many abnormal forms. And that's what marijuana does to you. It also lowers your sperm count. They've done studies since then, and what they've determined is that they have a sperm count that's 55% lower than normal. Of course, normal, and we've talked about this before, normal has gone down since the 1970s. It's gone down 60%. So the probability of a heavy pot smoker being a daddy is really, really low. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. You can't use marijuana as a birth control device. But if you are trying to get somebody pregnant, then you need to stay away from the marijuana. The ova must have its full complement of 23 chromosomes and be in the right position when the sperm reaches it. Strangely enough, this is very common for an individual who's relatively young. Right after first menarche, of course, an individual can't get impregnated. But as they grow older, as they develop as they acquire a boyfriend, just the act of necking and making out will actually regulate their period, as strange as that may seem. An individual who does not have a regular period, 1 month it's 28 days. It'll be 28 days after the last one, then it'll be 21 days, then it'll be 14 days. You know, if they have this really erratic menstruation, then they're less likely to get pregnant, strangely enough. Sometimes they'll have a prolonged period, sometimes they'll have a shortened period. But once they get a smell of the pheromones from the male, and once they become romantic with that male, it regulates their menstrual cycle, and they're more likely to get pregnant. And for this reason, if you've got a teenage daughter, and she gets a boyfriend, then they really do need to stay away from, they really do not need not to have sex, because she's the most likely person to get pregnant. When she's in her 30s, the window of ovulation is much, much shorter, so it's going to be more difficult for her to get pregnant. But when she's 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, she's ready to go, and the window is much, much larger. And this is the reason why we have so many teenage pregnancies. We don't have as many teenage pregnancies today, and people are going, oh, I don't know why, what's going on. I don't know if it's abstinence, if they've changed the way they're having sex. I have no idea. But there are far used pregnancies today. It may have something to do with video games. Really? Yeah, they're more interested in playing video games. I mean, really, not the girls, of course. It's the guys. Yeah. So, and maybe, I don't know, maybe males are masturbating more than they used to. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? Anyway, there are fewer female or teenage pregnancies than there used to be. For implantation to take place, the uterine wall must be ready for implantation. To get the uterine wall ready for implantation, they have to have a proper amount of LH and FSH. It has to be perfect. The zygote must implant near the top of the uterus. If it implants down at the bottom of the uterus, it will probably be spontaneously aborted. It's hard for women to carry a baby too low. If they do try to carry it too low, one of the things that will happen is they have to stay away. Oh, they can't lift anything if it implants too low. So normally it will implant up near the top. Now the odd thing is that male babies implant closer to the top than female babies do. So if a woman is carrying her baby low, it's probably... Don't tell anybody I said that. I'm hitting about 95% just by looking at women's bellies. And I need to probably keep my mouth shut. But this used to be a trick, because in the old days they couldn't you couldn't determine if somebody was carrying a male child or a female child. This is back in the 70s, and they had all kinds of tricks that they used, and it was about 50-50. So I mean, it didn't work. But if you've seen a lot of them, and I've seen hundreds of thousands of pregnancies, you get used to seeing which one is going to be the boy and which one's going to be the girl. So the boy fetuses are usually carried high, really high. I mean, like right under your sternum. I mean, real high. And the female is lower. So if you get a lower pregnancy, it's probably. Don't tell Christine I said that. I'm not looking. I'm trying not to look. Okay. I don't want to know, and they don't want to know. You can do the ultrasound now, and you can figure out what it is. But she doesn't want to know, so I'm not going to tell her. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to try to keep my mouth shut. It's not easy. Okay, so what are we doing? Adequate vascularization must take place between the embryo and the uterus. In other words, the baby has to implant itself. It becomes a parasite. At that juncture, it becomes a parasite. It connects itself to the mother's blood supply, and literally it becomes a parasite. One of the other things we know about pregnancy is that male fetuses are a little bit more toxic for the mother than a female baby is, because the female, of course, has the same hormones. It has a more similar genetic structure, and the male child looks more alien to the mother. So, and this is an absolute, of course, but male babies tend to cause more severe morning sickness, and it's because they're more alien. And the mother is more likely to lose a male a male fetus than she is a female fetus. Okay. We don't like to talk about it. We try to. So none of this is absolute, certainly. I mean, you can talk to 15 people, and 2 of them will say, no, my female children were a lot worse than my male children, and then the other 13 will say, yeah, that boy just about killed me. Well, that's why my mother called me little shit. My mother, yeah, she really suffered with me. I mean, she had 4 boy babies. I was the second male child that she had. But she suffered more with me than she did with any of the other children. So she hated me from the moment I was born. From the moment she got impregnated by my dad. I look just like my dad, so I know my dad's my dad. Okay. Anyway, okay. So what else is going on? Growth and cell division must take place on a continual and balanced pattern. This is really important. You can really destroy a fetus, not destroy, but you can really disrupt a fetus's growth pattern if an individual smokes pot. I was just reading something this weekend about should women smoke pot during pregnancy? And the answer is no. The answer is a big no. If she's shooting up with heroin, if she's drinking alcohol, all of those things disrupt growth. But one of the things that disrupts growth the most is smoking cigarettes, because cigarettes, of course, are vasoconstrictors. Then we discovered, of course, we had problems with women that smoked during pregnancy. Their fetuses were smaller. Their babies were smaller at birth. Anywhere between 5 and 7 pounds was relatively normal, but it's because women were smoking so much. Now babies are somewhere in the 7 to 9 pound range. I mean, just because we have slowed down female smoking of cigarettes. But worse than cigarettes is cocaine, because cocaine is also a vasoconstrictor. And anytime we are constricting blood supply, we're constricting blood supply to the fetus, of course. So anytime you're using cocaine, you're strangling the child with blood. So it's not getting any sustenance whatsoever. Of course, it was happening with cigarettes, but cigarettes aren't nearly the vasoconstrictor that cocaine was. So we started getting some really horrible birth defects when people started snorting cocaine. Now the other thing was that, and of course, who were to care? You've got a half dozen poor women give birth to babies with a physical problem. Nobody really cares. Well, what happens when it's the wealthiest person in town who gives birth to a child with all kinds of horrible birth defects? All of a sudden, we've got this rich person throwing a lot of money into research. And all they discovered was, well, your stupid trophy wife snorted too much cocaine while she was pregnant, and she did this to her own child. That's what we discovered. But it's really hard. That's not what they wanted to hear. So usually, if they're paying money, they're the ones that get to decide what the real problem is. So we fought about this thing for years, and then eventually, of course, they opened up. This is in Omaha. And there's a lot of rich people in Omaha. The second richest person in the United States is in Omaha. But at the time, the guy that owned not Papa John's, Godfather's Pizza, was a billionaire. One of the only billionaires in the United States. And here, this guy's his wife gave birth to a baby with birth defects. So he decided that he was going to open a research. He was going to research all of this stuff. And so he opened, at our hospital, he opened a research lab. And he called it Boys Town Research Facility, because Boys Town was right outside of Omaha. And he was Catholic. Anyway. So they started looking at alcohol, actually. And they're the ones that actually discovered They're the ones that followed up on all the information. If you look at when we talk about fetal alcohol syndrome, they didn't actually determine what fetal alcohol syndrome was all about until the 1980s. Well, it came out of Boys Town Institute. It came out of the research lab at St. Joseph Hospital that this guy funded, trying to exonerate his wife for giving birth to a defective child, or to a child with all kinds of horrible birth defects. The infant didn't survive. The birth defects were so extreme that the baby didn't survive. That one was, I wasn't in on the first one, but the second one had, the heart had developed outside the thorax. That was a mess. Now you can repair that. You can put the heart back in. You can cut a hole and just drop it. You can fix that, okay? But yeah, it was a mess. But luckily, he funded birth defects. He funded Boys Town Institute research facility at St. Joseph Hospital. And the first guy he had in charge was the biggest drunk I've ever met. He used to come down to my lab all the time. He used to come down to my lab to talk. He's slurring his words. He's having a little difficulty walking. You know, it's one of those kind of deals. He'd need to sit down. You know, he's walking along. He'd need to sit down in a chair. And I'd say something stupid like "rough night," and he'd say, "No, everything's fine." No, everything's fine. Well, aren't you doing research? Well, I'm doing an experiment right now. And I've got 15 minutes. Well, it took him 15 minutes to walk down to my lab. Anyway, he liked to talk to me. That was painful. So he told me the whole story. I got all these stories from this guy. And it was funny because the first fetal alcohol syndrome we found was with the Indians up on Pine Ridge, over Pine Ridge. That's where they discovered it. So he started working with the Indians up in northern Nebraska. What is that? It's the Ho-Chunk. Ho-Chunk, and there's a Dakota Sioux, Teton Sioux. The Teton Sioux are over there. Anyway, so he started doing research with those guys. I don't know why. Well, probably gave him booze or something. He was a mess. Okay, so what's happening? Must be ready for implantation. All right. As soon as the sperm penetrates the ovum, the structure becomes a zygote. And zygote means yolk. And the reason they call it a zygote is because for the next 12 to 14 days, it will live off the yolk until it implants on the uterine wall. It takes it that long to wander down the fallopian tube. Now, I've told you the story of my second wife. She had a problem with her fallopian tubes. We didn't know it. She wanted babies in the worst way. So she's always looking for somebody to knock her up. But I know. Here she was. When I met her, she was 21, and I was 25. Yeah. And I was 25. And I already had 2 kids. She thought that was good. Okay, good. So she was, you're fertile. And my son was only like 2 years old. So she was looking for somebody to impregnate her. But of course she had a problem, and I don't know why she didn't have herself looked at before. But it took her until she was stationed in Holland before they actually did not an experiment, but they did a procedure that where they went in through her belly button, and then they penetrated her fallopian tube and looked around to see why she couldn't get pregnant. And what they discovered was that her fallopian tube she was born with her fallopian tube adhesed to her colon. So instead of being straight, it was curved, and it was pinched off at the back. So what they did, they went in and they opened it up. which works almost. It could have worked. Well, she's got 2 of them, and both of them are attached to her colon, so they opened them both up. So she immediately got pregnant the next month. I mean, literally, she got pregnant the next month. Unfortunately, one of them was too crinkled for that to work, and so the ova got stuck. It got impregnated. I mean, they opened it up so that there was an opening, so the sperm could get in and impregnate her. And she did. She got pregnant the first month. But unfortunately, the egg, it was too crinkled for the egg to pass through the fallopian tube. So she had an ectopic pregnancy. It blew out her fallopian tube. So now she's only got 1. Or now, yeah, I guess she's, I don't know. I haven't talked to her since 2001. That's 17 years ago. So she was afraid to have sex after that because she's afraid she'd lose her fallopian tube. So this lady who was very sexually active all of a sudden became abstinent. Poor thing. I kind of feel sorry for her. And she eventually was artificially inseminated. That was the way she had babies. She had 2. She had a boy and a girl, just like she loved my kids. Me, but she really liked my kids. And I had a boy and a girl, so she had a boy and a girl. They were twins. That's the last I heard. They should be close to 20 years old by this time. I haven't communicated with them for a while. Anyway, so her fallopian tube was all screwed up because it was pinched off. But most fallopian tubes, of course, don't have that problem. As a matter of fact, that was an extremely rare case. Evidently, it was fairly common in Holland because they knew almost immediately they knew what the problem was. They had seen it before. You know, it's one of those kind of deals. So she had it fixed.
Is that the same thing as fibroids?
No, fibroid is where it, this is all muscle.
Yeah.
You know, this is all muscle and it's soft tissue. Fibroid is where the tissue turns hard. So it'll develop a knot, as it were. So all of a sudden, a fibroid uterus is where the uterus it can't expand anymore because it's fibroid. So it's not. The uterus is actually just a muscle, and it expands. You know, that one lady had 8 babies in there, and she carried that big stomach out. But it can expand, and so a fibroid uterus can't expand. It's like it's got scars all over it, but it's got these fibroid structures. Okay, what are we doing? Oh, as soon as the sperm penetrates the ova, the structure becomes a zygote. Within 12 hours, a single cell divides into 2 cells. Within 2 weeks, the zygote becomes an embryo and divides into 3 distinct layers. First, of course, it has to implant, and that is a very dangerous time for the zygote. The zygote has to implant, and it has to tie into the mother's blood supply. The blood supply has to be adequate enough for the individual or for the zygote to get enough nutrition. And if it doesn't, it will die and it will slough off. So a lot of times what will happen, and this takes 2 to 3 weeks, so you've got somebody who's late. Oh my God, I'm late. And then all of a sudden she has a period. Potentially what happened, yeah, she did get impregnated. She had an ova that was impregnated. It didn't implant properly, and it just fell, not fell off, but it didn't function. And since one of the things that happens when it implants is that it starts putting off hormones, and those hormones tell the uterus to keep going, to maintain itself. Now, sometimes, there can be all kinds of interesting problems. A woman's hormones might be off, so she's not producing enough LH, or she's producing too much LH, or there's a lot of things that can really mess you up. One of the things that they have done with birth control pills is a woman who has an erratic period, who has erratic periods. They'll give them birth control pills with a controlled amount of LH and a controlled amount of FSH and a controlled amount of progesterone, and it will reset the woman's hormones so that she can get pregnant. So birth control pills have actually produced more children. Well, that's not really fair to say. It has been able to regulate women's periods, and that's a real positive thing. And it has allowed them to get pregnant because of their regulated periods. What's happening here? Okay, so once it implants, then it becomes an embryo, and the embryo has 3 distinct layers. This is really important. Now, you can lose a pregnancy at any point. Usually, if you're going to lose a pregnancy, it is within the first within the first trimester. This is the most dangerous time for the fetus. Well, it's not even a fetus yet. The zygote may not implant, the uterus may not be ready for implantation, it may not be vascularized enough. This is when they usually lose their pregnancy. And it's not really a miscarriage yet. It's not a miscarriage until it implants and starts to grow, and then it dies. Something happens, and she loses her pregnancy. But this is all within the first 3 months of her pregnancy. So if she's going to lose her pregnancy, she'll probably lose it in the first 3 months. Okay. Okay, so we've got this 3-layer structure. It's 3 layers of cells. The nervous system develops from the outer layer of the 3 cells, the ectoderm. Ecto just means outside. It's the outside layer. So the ectoderm is on the outside. It grows into a flat oval plate. So it's flat. It's relatively flat. The cells don't grow at the same rate. Some of the cells on the outside are growing faster than the cells on the inside. And so what it does, it develops a groove. And this is known as the primitive streak. And this is going to become the spinal cord, because the cells on the outside are growing faster than the cells on the inside. The cells on the outside are going to become the rest of the nervous system. And the primitive streak is going to become the spinal cord in the brain. As the cells continue to divide, the groove slowly grows into a neural tube. The front or the anterior portion of the tube divides into 3 structures. That will become the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. Okay, there you go. So it becomes a tube. Now the reality is that the peripheral nervous system grows faster than the central nervous system. The central nervous system is the part that's in the middle. That's the neural tube. And it develops into not only the spinal column, but also the primitive portions of your brain. Midbrain, hindbrain, and forebrain. There you go. And that's how we develop. Now all this is taking place before she potentially knows that she's pregnant. I know. Yeah, well, this is at the 3, 4, the 3rd week, the 4th week. She hasn't really, she just missed her period. Okay. All right. So if she's a party girl and parties every weekend, yeah, she's already had 2 binges, and she's potentially kind of messed up the baby's neural tube. Yeah, before she even knows she's pregnant. By the 8th week of gestation, the fetus has developed all of the rudimentary organs of its body. The brain at this time takes up 1/2 of the fetus's mass. She just figured out that she was pregnant. Probably at the 3rd or the 4th week, she figured out that she was pregnant. Maybe she took a birth control. She took not a birth control pill. She took a pregnancy test. Clear Blue Easy. They're actually accurate up to 2 weeks of pregnancy. Now you may ask yourself, how in the world do those damn things work? Why does that test know that she's pregnant? Or do you? Do you care? Sure you do. It's human. It's a substance. Now remember that all these cells, this fetus is an alien structure. normally, if an alien structure starts growing in this woman's body, her immune system will kill it. That's what's supposed to happen. Okay. But this is a baby, and you certainly don't want to kill the baby. So this thing starts putting off a substance to protect it. And the chemical that it uses to protect itself is called human chorionic gonadotropin. A long name for something really interesting. Or HCG. If you've ever heard somebody talk about HCG, they're talking about human chorionic gonadotropin. The human chorionic gonadotropin will tell the mother that this is not a structure to be murdered or to be killed. It'll tell her immune system to lay off. So the more cells that she has, the more human chorionic gonadotropin she's putting off. And normally within 2 weeks, there are enough cells, and they're putting off enough human chorionic gonadotropin that it is detectable by all of the pregnancy tests. At 2 weeks. In the old days, it took a month. When I first started in the lab, we were the ones that did pregnancy tests. There were no home pregnancy tests that you could use. So we were the ones that did it, and we were accurate up to 4 to 8 weeks. By that time, it's a baby. By that time, it looks like this, 4 to 8 weeks. So yeah, that was the old days. And now, of course, we can tell fairly readily after 2 weeks that she's pregnant. Now, she hasn't even missed a period yet. At 2 weeks, she hasn't missed a period yet. Probably. Or maybe she just missed a period. I guess she just missed a period. But of course, women are late from time to time. I mean, nobody is on a schedule that's exact. So she needs to figure out that she's pregnant so she doesn't do something horrible to the baby. Take in any toxins like alcohol or marijuana or heroin or whatever. The brain at this time takes up 1/2 of the fetus's mass. The brain will continue to grow through the teenage years, and actually it grows until you're in your mid-20s. So the reality is, if you're a traditional student and you go to college right out of high school, you graduate at 21 or 22, your brain's still not fully developed yet. So you go to get your master's degree. Now you're 23 or 24, and your brain is just at the beginning of your adult structure with your master's degree. So maybe it's better just to wait until you're a little bit older, so you appreciate it more. The nervous system development takes place in 6 stages. The first one is known as neurogenesis, the formation of the neurons. The second one is cell migration, movement of the neurons to form nerve and cell populations. Differentiation is the third, development of distinctive types of neurons. The fourth is synaptogenesis, development of synaptic connections as axons and dendrites grow. Neuronal cell death is stage 5, selective death of neurons. And the last is synapse rearrangement, refinement of synaptic connections. And all this takes place before the baby is born. The first stage of nerve system development is neurogenesis. This is when the nerve cells are produced. Nerve cells themselves do not divide, but the pre-nerve cells, which are located in the inner layer of the neural tube, do divide, and they create a closely packed layer of cells called the ventricular zone. And this is what a ventricular zone looks like. It's packed neurons. Now this is going to happen in waves, as exciting as all that is. Remember when we talked about the cerebral cortex, we talked about the 6 layers of the cerebral cortex. Well, when I say waves, I'm talking about this ventricular zone, a whole layer of neurons. And since it happens in waves, we get 6 of them. And so, since we have 6 of them, as long as there's no disruption with these waves, the individual will be relatively intelligent because now they can pass information from one layer to the next. looking for whatever information they're looking for. The cells of the ventricular zone continue to divide and give rise to the daughter cells, which also divide. All the body's neurons and glial cells are derived from the ventricular mitosis. As exciting as all of this is. Now you can understand how all of this is happening in pyramids. All of this is happening in layers. So we get information following the pyramidal structure and the layers. So now we have information that is following a select line. And this is one of the reasons why if somebody asks you what is the capital of Maine, you have the ability to go to that portion of your brain that has to do with state capitals, or the part that has to do with Maine. And of course now you're going down through your layers trying to remember what the state capital of Maine is. Does anybody know what the capital of Maine is? It's Augusta. I knew the answer to that. That's why I asked that question. Neural cells will be completely developed by birth. So this whole structure is taking place during pregnancy, while the woman is pregnant. This is all taking place in the womb. So in order to make that fetus as brilliant as you possibly can, you need to stay away from toxins. And one of those toxins, of course, is cigarettes. Another is marijuana, another is heroin, another is cocaine. All of these things will disrupt the structure of the brain. I told you the story of the crack baby. The first crack baby in Oklahoma City pulled a gun on me and tried to shoot me. His mother was a stripper. She was so pretty. She was like this tall. She was a very attractive woman. But her son was the biggest jerk in the world. He liked me. I was his favorite teacher. So why did he try to shoot me? Nobody could figure it out. He kept saying I was his favorite teacher. I was his favorite teacher. I guess he thought about me, and that's why he had a gun, and so he tried to shoot me. Anyway, he was a crack baby. Now none of this, there is no logic to what happened. And primarily it's because she was smoking crack when she was pregnant with him. So she was disrupting all of these layers, all of this pyramidal system. She was disrupting all of this. One of the things we knew about him was that we would have diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, but he was only 12. And you don't diagnose somebody that's 12 with antisocial personality disorder. But that's what his problem was. Now, why didn't he care about people? Well, something happened in his brain while she was smoking her crack that disrupted the structure of his neurons in his brain, making him antisocial. When he pulled the trigger, he was smiling. Just like, this is a kid that I allowed, they wouldn't let him out on the playground because he was mean. He was mean to the other kids. So during recess, during lunch break, he would come into my office and I would let him sit there and we would have conversations. If he wanted to talk, sometimes he didn't want to talk. I also had a stack of National Geographics and he liked to look through the National Geographics. So he had the same smile on his face as he did when I opened the door for him so that he could come in for lunch. Exactly the same smile on his face as he pulled the trigger. He stuck the gun in my chest and pulled the trigger. But he had been messing with the gun so much that he had jammed a round up in the chamber. So it didn't fire. And he started to eject the bullet. Of course, it wouldn't have made any difference if he'd done that because he'd already given away all of his bullets. But there was another teacher that came by and grabbed it. And of course, this is all happening within several seconds. I didn't react at all. I was just kind of stunned. But he had the same look on his face that he always did when he came to my door. Stuck the gun in my chest and pulled the trigger. He never fired the gun. He didn't shoot the gun all day. He had it all day. It was fully loaded when he got to school. What he was doing is pulling out the clip, and he was ejecting bullets and handing them out to people. It was a 12-shot clip. It's 25 caliber pistol, automatic pistol. He kept jamming it back up in there, and there was already a bullet in the chamber. And so every time he jammed the clip back up, it got more and more crooked. So by the time he decided to pull the trigger, it was jammed pretty good. Anyway, it was his brother's pistol. Okay, so that's what happens to your brain. You know, potentially if you take in any of these toxins, it will really disrupt what's going on, the structure of the brain. Isn't it lucky that I have a story like that to tell when I'm talking about brain development? You know, I should have kicked the kid out of class, but his mother came and begged me not to kick him out of class because he was fairly disruptive, and everybody else had already kicked him out of class. And she didn't flirt with me at all. She didn't have to. She was so pretty. It was just blinded by it. Okay. Well, maybe I'm an idiot. Neural cells will be completely developed by birth. Each neural structure in the brain will develop at the same time in gestation for all humans. And for this reason, of course, we have a list of when these areas will develop. So if you disrupt something in the 8th week, then it messes up your eyesight, you know, that kind of thing. So we can tell when somebody's screwed up, when something happened to somebody, by what happens to the brain.
So remember one time you were saying why a lot of us wear natives wear glasses, so that kind of the development?
I think it's genetic.
Genetic?
I'm guessing it's genetic. Yeah, this kind of drives me nuts. A lot of you guys wear glasses, and you would think that somebody who lived by hunting would have good eyesight. Women have poorer eyesight than men do, on the average. But you guys have your eyesight is all nearsighted, isn't it? Yeah, you're all nearsighted. Is that right? Or are you farsighted? On the Fort Belknap Reservation, I am farsighted because I have presbyopia. I'm an old man. I'm almost 70 years old. So I have to wear glasses to read. But on the Fort Belknap Reservation, people wear glasses and they have to take their glasses off to read. So they're the opposite. They don't have presbyopia. They're nearsighted. So yeah. So they have to take their glasses off to read. It drives me nuts. So me, I have to put my glasses on to read, and of course up there. Not only that, but a lot of people on the Fort Belknap Reservation are left-handed. I had a class with 12 people in it, and there were 2 people that were right-handed in the class. Well, I was 13 counting me, and I was one of the right-handed people. The rest of them were left-handed. It's really weird. Why? You know, it's all genetic. So I'm thinking as far as American Indians are concerned, and of course each tribe is its own distinct genetic structure, you know. And you guys are different from them because they're Algonquian speaking people and they came from east, and you guys are Athabascan speaking people and you came from the west. So almost all the Athabascan speaking people live in Alaska, they live in Canada, they live on the west coast, and you guys of course live here in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. But there's one group of Dene speaking people that live in North Carolina. One group. But that's it. But those guys are way up north, on the east coast. So the Chippewa, the Cree, all those guys, Cheyenne and Blackfeet are both Algonquin speaking. So, I mean, you're looking at 2 migrations that happened from different areas. So probably your genetic structure and their genetic structure is different. So whereas the Grovant, they're left-handed and they're nearsighted, it's possible that your group doesn't have the same thing. We don't think that American Indians, the indigenous people of the Americas, all got here at the same time. We don't think that's what happened. We think it was different migrations coming from Asia or whatever. Okay. Or unless you were here anyway. Which means, well, I mean, if we look at the genes of the Dene people, and then we look at the genes of the Hopi people, or the Zuni, or the Tahano or Odom, the Papago, they used to be the Papago. Okay. They're different. They're different. So you're probably different genetic groups. The people that were the Plains Indians, the Tonkawa, the Kaw, who else is over there? The Caddo, the Osage. Yeah, totally different group. Totally different genetic structure. Okay. So if you've got genes from those guys, okay. Your eyes are different. I got better eyes. People in my family have really bad teeth. Oh, God. It's been horrible. I've spent more money on my teeth than I've spent on my education. It's so irritating. So I needed to reproduce with somebody with good teeth. Unfortunately, I didn't. My poor kids. My two poor kids. Anyway, that's the way it works. I have a brother with nice teeth. One brother with nice teeth. The rest of us have shitty teeth. Neurons of the developing nervous system are always on the move. So you got to remember that a lot of this stuff has to do with genes. And that's one of the reasons why we think that intelligence is relatively genetic. It's like 40% genetic, 60% environmental. Or less. You know, it's really hard to say. But you have to be good during pregnancy. I keep telling you about my great niece that had the heroin-addicted baby. Well, we had no idea what that baby's going to look like when it gets older, or if it does get older. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like. I'm guessing it's going to have antisocial personality disorder. But she is bipolar. And her mother's borderline. Yeah. So we had no idea. So, you know, a lot of it has to do with genes.
Even if you take the baby out and put it in a different environment, would that make a difference?
60-40. It's going to have a better opportunity. Oh, they're not letting that crazy lady take care of that baby. Well, they kind of are, but they're not. The baby's in a healthier environment. But the other question is, this is an environment that raised one child that had borderline personality disorder, another child that had bipolar disorder, and now here this is a heroin-addicted baby. So what's the probability? I mean, that environment, even though it looks enriched, it produced somebody with borderline personality disorder, somebody with bipolar disorder, and it produced a child that gave birth to a baby, and she was using a double dosage of heroin. She was shooting up with heroin, and she was giving synthetic heroin to keep her from wanting more heroin. So, yeah. So this environment, my brother's house, that environment has already produced 2 screwed up kids. And now we're going to raise this child in that same environment. What's the probability the child's going to turn out okay? It's already screwed up 2 people. So what's the possibility? This is really kind of an interesting family because they only have one baby. and then they stop. And then they raise that baby as a special child, and then the child turns out with some kind of mental illness. I hope they're not listening. Oh man. During cell migration stage, the cells of the ventricular layer, oh, it's 9 o'clock, wait a minute. It's 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. The ventricular layer begin to move where they will end up. In humans and other primates, by birth, all of the neuronal cells will have found their way to where they will always be by birth. And that's because we have such big brains. And for that reason, of course, we get no more growth. Some neurons will creep down glial cells known as radial glial cells, and so they will change their position. But this is before birth. Neurons can either move down the glial cells or they can jump from one to the next. This migration is guided by various chemicals called cell adhesion molecules. And it's really kind of fascinating to watch. They've actually got films of these neurons jumping from one cell to the next, from one glial cell to the next. The cerebrum is formed by wave after wave of neurons till the entire cerebral cortex is formed. And as I told you before, there's 6 different waves, and so you get 6 different layers. And as long as nothing happens during those, while those layers are being formed, then we're going to have a normal, brilliant child. But they don't have to take in any toxins. They don't have to smoke cigarettes, they don't have to smoke pot, they don't have to shoot up with heroin, they don't have to smoke crack to screw up these layers. There's other things that can screw them up. What if the mother is in a contentious relationship, and so she's producing all this cortisol to protect herself from her significant or insignificant other, or whoever that guy is that keeps beating on her? That can screw things up. Anything can screw things up. What if she watches a really sad movie and she starts producing strange hormones? That's another possibility. What if she's just one of those nervous people that gets upset about nothing? And of course, while you're pregnant, sometimes you get upset about nothing. There's no pickles in the refrigerator. What am I going to do? Go get me ice cream. I don't have any ice cream. It's 3 o'clock in the morning and I need it right this second. Get some pickles while you're out. Yeah, you know, that kind of stuff can change things a little bit, potentially. Once the pre-neuronal cells reach their destination, genes in the cells begin to make the proteins that are required by neurons. At this point, the neurons begin differentiating into the distinctive neurons of the region that they are in. And of course, then they have a specialization. They have differentiated into the cells that they are supposed to be. Most neuronal cells differentiate through induction. They take on the task of all their neighboring cells. Some cells are undifferentiated cells and will differentiate into any cells that they are close to, and these are known as stem cells. Stem cells are really kind of amazing. You can take a stem cell and you can put it anywhere on the human body and it will develop it will develop a neuronal pattern of the cells around it. So potentially you can take a stem cell, if you've got a break in your spinal column, you can take a stem cell or a group of stem cells, put them in where the break is, and they will reconnect the spinal column. I know. This is kind of exciting. They have used stem cells to repair the substantia nigra where the dopamine is produced. I know, that's what happened with Michael J. Fox. He started having symptoms of Parkinson's disease, and he had an operation where they implanted stem cells in his brainstem to produce more dopamine-producing cells in his brainstem. And it worked for a while. Now you say, wait a minute, we don't do that kind of research in the United States. You're right, we don't do that kind of research in the United States. Michael J. Fox is an American. He's from Canada, and they do that type of research in Canada. Before he made the movie Doc Hollywood, he was starting to have Parkinsonian symptoms. So he went back up to his home country and had stem cells implanted in his brainstem. It worked for a while. He was able to get through the movie, and I think he made other movies after that. So he was okay for about 3 or 4 years, and then his Parkinsonian symptoms came back, and now they're in pretty bad shape. Now he's in pretty bad shape. We don't see him on television anymore. His symptoms are too severe. Now the other question you have to ask yourself is, why does he have Parkinson's disease? And why did he develop it at such a young age? What is going on? The answer is cocaine. Oh yeah, he was insulting his brain with drugs, and he had a proclivity for Parkinson's disease anyway. He was a big drinker before he became rich enough to snort cocaine. So he was a bit of a party animal, even though he's only 5'3". There you go. So, but we don't do stem cell research in the United States. It passed through Congress, and it was vetoed by President George W. Bush. He vetoed it. He said, well, we're acting like God. So he decided that he was going to veto it. Maybe in the future, I don't know, maybe if Trump starts developing Parkinson's disease, he will decide that it's okay to start using stem cell research. But the evangelicals are really against it. Are there that many evangelicals in the United States? No, but politically they're relatively strong. You can make or break an election on evangelical voters. Oh, wait a minute, I need to know what time it is. Okay. When neurons migrate to their final destination, they start the process of synaptogenesis. In other words, they start connecting themselves to making synapses with all the organs around the area so that they can have a perfect structure. Axons and dendrites begin to web out, making contact with cells that they are going to be responding to. This is done through swollen ends of dendrites and axons called growth cones. With growth cones, each reach out using fine filaments, filopodia, or plates, lamellipodia. There you go. And these are growth cones. And they're seeking connections. And they will only make perfect connections. If they don't make a perfect connection, then the cell will destroy itself because it didn't make a perfect connection. And then it will be replaced by another neuron that tries to make a perfect connection. And they will keep doing this until they get that perfect connection. Growth cones are drawn by chemical signals called chemoattractants. Growth cones can also be repelled by chemical signals called chemorepellents. As adults, we maintain synaptogenesis structures, dendritic growth cones, axonic chemoattractants, and chemorepellents. Synapses can form rapidly in dendrites and dendritic spines. The number of spines increase rapidly after birth and are affected by experience. So if you take in a toxin, and I keep talking about toxins, if you drink alcohol, your brain will react in a certain way. Well, usually that way is relatively toxic, and your brain won't want to do this again. So you'll get a downregulation. You will get a reduction of spines. You get a reduction of spines. It's called downregulation, so that it's protecting itself. So the next time you're stupid and you drink too much alcohol, you're not going to have the same extreme reaction because your brain is trying to protect itself from that extreme reaction. So you'll have a downregulation. Now the problem is, yeah, sure, last weekend you got drunk and it really bothered your brain, so it downregulated. So now you're not going to have the same reaction this time. Well, let's say that you wait for 3 or 4 months before you drink again. Well, your brain, of course, it has developed this need, this desire for this chemical. It wants that reaction. So all of a sudden, you will start producing more of these dendritic spines, looking for that alcohol, seeking that alcohol. And that's known as an upregulation. Whoops. So we have a downregulation which keeps you from poisoning yourself, and you have an upregulation when you are addicted to something and you're seeking it. You have an upregulation, making it more likely that you will use. And this is known as an addiction. Upregulation and downregulation. This is what happens when people smoke pot. When they smoke pot, of course, they get a reaction, a mellowing reaction. When they're not smoking pot, they get the opposite reaction. Their brain, whereas before everything is exciting to that individual, while they're not smoking pot, when they're not stoned, now they're bored to tears, and you can't find something that will excite this individual. They become easily irritated, and that's because of the upregulation. Their spines are looking for marijuana. Neuronal cell death, apoptosis, is crucial to brain development, especially during the embryonic stages. Remember, we will develop things. We have capabilities, and we lose those capabilities. An example would be these natural reactions that we have after birth. We have the ability to swim. As a newborn infant, we can swim. But after a couple months, we lose that ability, that instinct. It's gone. What happened to it? Well, the instinct that we had, the neuronal structure that we had in order to allow us that swimming movement and the ability to raise our head above the water, that portion of our brain was destroyed. We didn't need it. And since we didn't, you either use it or you lose it. And since we weren't thrown into the water and needed to swim, we lost it. So after a couple months, we don't have that capability. And that's because of apoptosis. That portion of the brain is gone. The neurons that allowed us to swim are no longer there. And they have been destroyed. Apoptosis.
Because we don't use it.
Because we don't use it, exactly. You either use something or you lose something. If you've got a brilliant individual and they go on a bender for 2 or 3 years, when they come back, they're not nearly as smart as they were before. That portion of their brain is gone. It has been destroyed. Their brain has destroyed itself. It has destroyed that portion because they didn't use it. You either use it or you lose it. What time is it? Let me tell you a quick sex story.
Meanwhile.
Go away, Stephanie. You don't want to hear it. I was working in a hospital in Oklahoma City, and this guy came in for, he was going to have surgery, and asked him, well, what kind of surgery are you going to have? They were going to put a penile pump in his body so that he could have an erection. And being an idiot and being kind of curious, I asked him, well, what happened? He said, well, I was married to this lady and she didn't want to have sex. So for 13 years, we didn't have sex. And since we weren't having sex, I never cared about an erection. So after 13 years of not having erections, he couldn't have an erection. He had lost the capability of having an erection. So he had a new girlfriend, and he was going to get married. And he couldn't have an erection. And the problem, I don't know, the sex is one of those things that everybody does whatever they do. But, and he didn't have to have sex after that, but she was young, and she wanted to have babies. So they decided that in order for him, and this is back, way back before Viagra. This is back in the, when was I in Oklahoma? 90 through 94. So this was in that early 90s before Viagra was invented. So they were going to put a penile pump in so that he could have an erection. and then potentially he could ejaculate and maybe impregnate his new wife. But that was the point. He had not used it, so he lost it. He lost the ability to have an erection. It's really kind of tragic. Why are we talking about this? Oh, we're talking about apoptosis. Okay, okay. And so what happens is those neurons will be destroyed, and that's known as apoptosis. So anytime you don't use something, those neurons may go away, and you may not be able to do it in the future. So you need to practice. You need to do whatever you need to do. I'm not talking about sex. This is not one of those. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. Neuronal cell death. Now the reality is, and since we're talking about erections, I guess I better finish this topic. One of the reasons why males have erections first thing in the morning is because their brain goes through this checklist, and that's one of the things that they check off is an erection. So that's why they have morning wood or whatever you want to call it. I know that doesn't sound very good, does it? Neuronal, this is all scientific, it's all biology, it's all stuff that happens. Okay. Neuronal cell death ranges from 20 to 80%, varying from region to region of the brain and the spinal cord. An area needs only so many neurons and synapses, and as the area grows, more neurons than they are needed flood into the area to ensure that the most perfect neuronal structure and synapse are created. Remember, if it's not perfect, then it's going to destroy itself, and it's going to wait for another neuron to come in. So we've got all this flooding taking place. We're looking for perfect structures. We want to be a perfectly brilliant individual. So if it's not a perfect synapse, then it will die. And the reason it dies is because it commits suicide. As exciting as that is. All cells carry a gene that causes a sudden influx and release of calcium ions that causes the mitochondria to release a protein called Diablo, of course. Diablo, of course, is Spanish for devil. Exactly, the devil protein. Diablo binds the inhibitors of apoptosis proteins, the IAPs, that have been inhibiting a family of proteins called caspases. And this is known as apoptosis. And the last thing we're going to do today is I'm going to show you a film of apoptosis. Do we have time? Yeah, I think we have. According to my watch, good. Video not unavailable. Ah, rats, I didn't look at this before. Okay. Anyway, it releases caspases. The caspases break the cell down. Now the wonderful thing about the neuron is that it recycles everything. So all the proteins go back into the protein store. I mean, it utilizes everything. So it's not like we're destroying a cell and then we're just throwing pieces away. Then you have to urinate it out because it's all waste product. It isn't all waste product. A lot of it is recycled. As exciting as that is. Caspases. And it's really kind of cool because the cell is a solid cell, then all of a sudden it kind of shrinks and then it explodes. And of course all of the different chemicals are taken back, are reabsorbed by the body, and we get apoptosis. All right, why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time. At apoptosis next week, as exciting as that is.